Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator of the Bhakti Center in New York City, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Tuesday. And guess who's back? Mara's back. She's been on vacation.
Welcome back, welcome back.
We were singing the Welcome Back Kotter song to her. You missed that. If you were on Zoom, you heard it. And we have a welcome back trivia question because we didn't ask much from Mara when she was gone. We said, hey,
We're just going to quiz her the whole show.
It's sunny. It's sunny. You enjoy yourself. All we're asking you to do is learn 2 shlokas in Sanskrit and English. Mara.
No, it was one. It was just one shloka, rather.
I actually gave her 2. I gave her 1855 and 1866.
I only learned 1 though.
You learned, okay, and it's what do you call it? She had very long plane rides, especially if you laid over to get to Albany. So you have no good excuse.
Okay,
What you got for us?
1866. So
No, you have to hold it. We need a blindfold or something like this. Make sure you're just not reading it off the screen.
Right-hand corner of the screen.
I can't believe you guys are making me close my. Sarvadharman Parityagya Mam Ikam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarvabhavebhyo Mokshayasyami Masuchaha. Abandon all varieties.
Don't clap
I
yet.
was gonna say a pundit is born. Incredible.
Hardly. Abandon all varieties of Dharma and just surrender unto me. I will deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear.
Boom. I am completely satisfied with that. We don't need a second one. That was perfect.
My sound effect button didn't work. Congratulations. That's pretty good. Your first shloka. Was that your first shloka?
Yeah. It was.
All right. It wasn't so hard. Was it hard?
No, it wasn't so hard.
You've heard it many times, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
like it was. There's a familiarity with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to memorize these little wisdom nuggets because these nectar nuggets, they stay in your brain. You can even write them on the wall on a blackboard or something, and walk around the house and saying them, and they stay in your brain when you need them most. Can I tell you a good father win, Kaustubha? I got a lot of dad fails. I could write a book on father fails.
But this was a win.
This was a win. I was, and yeah, I might have told you this, but when I first got married, my wife had 2 little kids. And so I was like, okay, I got to be a dad to 2 little kids. I don't even know anything about
Crash course, right?
I was thinking, well, what do I know? I was like, well, I know the Bhagavad Gita and I know the Mahabharata. I'm going to teach them that. So I started teaching them shlokas, and I was like, learn shlokas, win love. No, I was like, I'd give them a prize if they would learn like 10 shlokas.
Right.
So every morning on the way to school, we just drill these shlokas again and again. And if they win, they would get a wrist rocket. You know what a wrist rocket is?
I know what a wrist rocket is, yeah.
Okay. It's like if you don't know, it's like
a high-powered slingshot.
High-powered slingshot, which every kid loves. So anyway, they learned 10 shlokas, and they memorized them. And one day, they went to the movies with their mom, and it was this kids' movie, but it was sort of had a very sad ending, where the hero child died. And so the older boy, who was like 7, he was just crying like anything when he came home. And I was like, what's the matter? My wife was like, well, it was really weird. It was like really sad. And he died. And the younger one, who was like 6, just goes, I wasn't sad. You know why? I was like, no, why? He goes, Dehi Rashmin yata dehi komaram yovanam jara. He quoted verse 2:13. And he said, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this life, from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly enters a new body at the time of death. One who is wise is not bewildered by such a change. I was like, whoa. It's times like distress and loss and heartbreak, or movies that break your heart, that you need some nugget to fall back on, some little piece of truth. So if you can store those in your mind instead of all the other, think about all the nonsense I have stored in my mind.
Welcome back, Cotter.
Welcome back. I could sing that song by heart. So we fill that cup with like wisdom and truth. And so and you make a little game out of it. And it's not that hard. And now that's yours, Mary. You keep that. You keep that,
Mary. And now 213 is the next one. You got to go learn that, because even little kids are learning this. So
even little kids are learning this one. You can do it.
Okay.
Especially, I'm looking at faces on Zoom here. Bhakti, Matthew, Hollyball, Vivi, David Charles Wilson. Learn it. Kylie, learn those shlokas.
And Mara, you know that Raghunath is going to throw that at you from time to time on the show. He's going to say, okay, 1866. So like you can't forget it either. You got to keep
proud
refreshing
of her.
it.
Now we're raising the bar. 1855. And these are big ones. These are the big shlokas, that like they start making up the fabric of like who we are. Like that one, just surrender to Krishna. I'll take away all your fear. I need to hear that on a regular basis. You could say that to yourself in English 100 times, and it will just sort of like unfold itself. Yeah.
That's the thing. What your son did there was, like, that's the process that's given in Gita, given in Upanishads, that you not only hear this, but you reflect on it, right? Like when that moment comes, like, oh my God, I'm, like my brother's crying because of this horrible death that took place on the screen, right? But then you reflect on that knowledge, and that's how it's that fire of the reflection on the knowledge, the jnana tapasa, that matures this knowledge into wisdom. Then you see the world through the eyes of wisdom.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, that's what we're doing with all these nectar nuggets, all these hashtags, all these like coffee mugs we're talking about making. They're supposed to stay in the heart and follow us around when we have these times of great distress, or great loss, or something, anything that's throwing us off course.
I was a little worried that Mara was going to come back different, like kind of like, I don't know, like a hippie like a California, some kind of, like looking like Janis Joplin or something like that, and just like talking different,
Talking different. I think she's the same, but she's a little wiser now.
I told you she was going to come back, though, right? I told you not to worry, Robert.
Yes.
She came back.
All right. Anyway, maybe that's our nectar nugget. I had a different nectar nugget, but maybe that's our nectar nugget of the day.
All right.
Learn.
Sounds good.
Okay. All righty. So what do you say we get into the Srimad Bhagavatam? We're in a nice place right here. Canto 3. Chapter is it Kaustubha? 7?
We're in chapter 7.
Text.
And we're going to start with text
8.
10 today.
Text 10.
Yeah. But that will be preceded by
our magical prayers.
Okay.
Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service to the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. You got any translation for us, Kaustubha?
Oh, I sent you that. I could try to pull it up.
Kaustubha retranslated it for us.
Well,
Using
it's
his
kind of.
Sanskrit.
Let's see if I can find it. Well, there are two possibilities, right? Here's one. I was born blind in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual masters treated my eyes with their words of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto them.
I like that. Text that to the crew.
Okay. Send it off to the crew.
Okay. So we chapter text 10. The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity.
Hold it. Slow down. 1 second, Raghu, okay?
Sometimes you got to dive in.
We need the context.
Okay.
Context. Okay. So Vidor had put a really important question before Maitreya. They're sitting. Where are they sitting? I'll put you on the hot seat.
They are sitting in a cafe.
In a Parisian cafe.
Small cafe.
There's a accordion player
Rishikesh.
outside on the
Drinking
sidewalk.
chai. Where are they sitting? In Haridwar on the bank of the
They're in
Ganga?
Haridwar. Yeah, they're in Haridwar. They're at the foothills of the Himalayas, near the Ganges River. And Maitreya is putting questions before. I'm sorry, Vidura is putting questions before Maitreya. Here is this question. This is, you see, I want to frame this, right? Because this is a crucial verse or two that we're going to hear today.
Mm-hmm.
This is a potential life changer, game changer here. This answer, this question and this answer right here,
Okay.
this can change everything.
Memorize it, Mara. Giving her more work to do by saying that.
Memorize it. So here was the question. It's a really good question because we're coming from a place, we're here in this philosophy how we're not the body, right? We're the spark of spiritual energy that's different. The body is made out of material energy, which means, Raghu,
It's temporary.
it's temporary. Thank you.
Goes
Right?
away. It's like a wave.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
a wave in the ocean.
Always changing, right? Everything that's made out of matter it falls under the influence of time, of the force of time. And so therefore it's always changing. So our bodies are made out of matter, they're changing. Or any possession that we may have, it's composed of matter. It's constantly shifting, changing.
It's
right?
like the river. You don't step in the same river twice.
So they
You
say.
heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that. And so, but the soul, the Atma, that's unchangeable, right? And Bhagavad Gita is going to tell us all this, right? That even though as the verse you quoted, 2:13, Dehinosmin yata dehe, the body's changing.
Mm.
It's a child's body one day, and you turn around, and now it's a teenage body, and you turn around, now it's a middle-aged body, then it's an old body, right? That's constant, but that the Atma is never changing. So why should a sober person, a wise person, become disturbed by that, become bewildered by that, right? So that's what we're hearing from Bhagavad Gita. Then Krishna will go on to say you can't cut this soul in the soul, the Atma. It can't be cut in half. It can't be burnt. It can't be, there's nothing you can do to it. It's unchangeable, right?
It can't be blended, fried.
Can't be blended. And we also hear that the nature of the soul, right? We say it's Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat means that it's eternal, and Chit refers to its consciousness, its awareness, as well as its knowledge. That it understands that, I am not matter. And Ananda means blissful, right? So the nature of this unchangeable Atma is that it's eternal, it's full of knowledge, it's full of bliss. Okay, that's great news, but hold it. Why am I not feeling bliss all the time? If that's my nature,
Yeah.
right? If I'm unchangeable and my nature is blissful, well, then why am I going through all kind of miseries and sufferings in life? misfortunes, all kind of issues, right? Good question, is it not?
Yeah, because you're not learning shlokas and you're not dancing enough. You got to dance more.
Well, if you learn this shloka, then you'll have the answer to this. Well, there's a couple shlokas, okay? But
I
here's
present myself blissful on social media.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, but okay. So here's how he phrased the questions. This was text 5 and text 6 of chapter 7 of Canto 3. Vidura asks, the pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes, right? Unchangeable. So then, how does that Atma, how does that soul become engaged in nescience? How do we fall into ignorance? How are we engaged in doing dumb stuff, right? How does this happen? He says, the Lord, and he takes it even further. He says, the Lord, as the super soul, the Paramatma, is situated in every living being's heart, right? So not only is our nature blissful and full of knowledge and eternal, but also right next to us, right in the heart, next to that Atma, is the Paramatma, is the super soul, situated in every living being's heart. Why then do living entities, why do our activities result in misfortune and misery? In the kleshas, right? That's the word that's used here in klesho. We go through the kleshas. All different kinds of sufferings, right? Good question, right?
Great question.
Okay, so now we're going to hear the answer. And the answer comes in text 10 and text 11.
All right, text 10. The living entity, that's us, that's the soul,
Mm-hmm.
is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. As the moon, reflected in water, appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of water, so the self-associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. What do you think about that? That's pretty good.
Yes.
Just like suppose you see a reflection of the moon, it's in the river or the water rather, and when it's windy, it starts to move. The moon isn't moving.
Right.
The wind is making it move.
The wind is,
moon
well,
is
it's not even
solid.
it's making the water move.
This whole existence of ours is a reflection of something real. Isn't that mind-blowing?
It's such a great analogy. There's two analogies given. One is of seeing your own head get cut off, and the other is the reflection of the moon on the water. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Okay, of seeing your own head cut off. The idea here is that if my nature is blissful, but I'm not feeling bliss, it seems like I lost something. Right, I had something and I lost it. Right, but I'm supposed to be unchangeable. But the message here is that this loss is illusory. Okay, it's not. You actually haven't lost anything. Isn't that a relief to know? Right,
Yeah.
you haven't lost anything. But this klesha that you're going, this feeling that I've lost my true nature, that's an illusion. And then the example is like in a dream, you might see your own head get cut off. Now, think about it, right? It's kind of like a logical fallacy. If my head is cut off, how could I see my cut off head? Right? I need a head to be able to see the cut off head. So if I'm seeing my head cut off, well then my head must not be cut off. It just doesn't work. It has no meaning. This is the words that Maitreya says. He says artena vina. It's artena means something has purpose or meaning, and vina negates it. It's without meaning. Right? There's no meaning to this. It's the idea that I am miserable, that I'm depressed, that I am bored, that I'm unhappy, that I've become this. There's no meaning to that.
It's such a gory analogy. I just can't stop thinking about getting heads cut off. And then I'm starting to think, like you're getting into philosophy. I'm just thinking about heads and battles.
That's because you
how
listen
many
to
heads
all
have been
these,
cut off
murder
historically.
podcasts.
No, I don't. I'm just thinking thousands of heads have been cut off in history.
Okay.
Just, who would do such a thing? And is it a good way to go? Like, would you mind? Like it might just it's off. And then it's it. Might be the easiest way to go. Get your head cut off.
Maybe.
Anyway.
But I don't think that's the way Vidor took it. I don't think he started. I don't think he said, just think about it. All the heads that have been cut off in history. No.
I'm sorry to digress, but it just brings up these images.
Okay. That's all right. But you know,
Let's
this
go to
is
the other. I like the other analogy. It's a little gentler. The moon reflecting on a pool of water.
well, we'll get to that. But first, let's focus on this, right? Because, and by the
You've
way,
been obsessed with this analogy for like a week.
you have been?
You have been. You've been telling about this moon analogy. Or
I
this,
talk about this all the
head cut off.
time because
The
it's
head
such a good
cut
one.
off analogy?
No, not the head cutting off. The moon one.
Okay.
Yeah, but the head cutting one off, that's really good too. Just again, you know, the idea that, just think about it. We were, on Saturday, we read a question from someone who was, suffering from depression, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you're not alone, right? That is so widespread, that our mind becomes so powerful that it gets in these negative loops. And even though we're trying to shake it, we can't shake it. Sometimes we can't sleep. Sometimes we don't want to go to sleep because we have bad dreams, or sometimes we're just trying to escape our depression because the only way to escape seems to be to go to sleep. It's like there's so much suffering in the world. And here's a verse that's saying that actually, it's not just hearing the verse is going to immediately relieve all the symptoms, but it's like it's the door opening up to like the hope to understand that, hey, what you're experiencing, in one sense there's no meaning to it. You that's not you. That's your mind that's suffering, right? But you are situated perfectly behind it all. Now let's try to get control of that mind, and that's what yoga is for. It's such a, in text 8, Vidur is called Tattva Jigyas. It says Tattva Jigyasuna, that he's inquisitive in terms of tattva, in terms of the truths, in terms of what's important. He really wants to know. And Maitreya is called Bhagavat Chitta, that his mind is engaged in Bhagavan, right? It's engaged in the Bhagavatam. You could say it's, he has this mind that's been purified through his contemplation, what he's chosen to contemplate. Just like everybody here this morning and everybody that's listening to the podcast, they've made a decision. I'm going to contemplate teachings of Bhagavatam because I want to become Bhagavat Chitta. I want my mind to become infused with Bhagavatam. So you have this perfect combination of questioner who's really inquisitive about truth, not about so many other things, not about temporary things, not about unimportant things. And then you have this mind that's been infused with Bhagavatam, that's been infused with the wisdom of the Bhagavatam. And so you get a perfect question, you get a perfect answer, right? And the answer is so important to all of us because we are these Dentikans in Kali Yuga who are suffering, the kleshas. You want to look up the kleshas, Mara? Give us the 5 kleshas. And maybe Raghunath has them memorized. I forget them sometimes. Yeah,
there's different way. There's different categories of kleshas, I think.
Yeah,
there's
maybe
3 kleshas,
well,
5.
Yeah, I mean the
Avidya,
Yoga Sutras. Avidya, ignorance.
Avidya for ignorance. Asmita, ego. Raga, attachment. Dvesha, aversion. And abhinavesha, fear of death.
Fear, yeah. So we're suffering from these kleshas, right? And so Maitreya is saying, okay, good question. First, let's point out that feeling is actually, in one sense, there's no meaning to it. It's like seeing your own head get cut off. Okay, good to know. And then next verse, why don't we read it again, text 11.
As the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of water, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter.
Now, here's so much Srila Prabhupada's commentary. He says the moon in the sky is fixed and does not appear to quiver like the moon on the water. Actually, the original moon in the sky, like the original moon in the sky, the moon reflected on the water should also not quiver, But because of being associated with water, the reflection appears to be quivering. Although the actual fact is that the moon is fixed. The water moves, but the moon does not move. Similarly, the living entities appear to be tainted by material qualities like illusion, lamentation, and miseries. Although in the pure soul, such qualities are completely absent. The word pratiyate, which means apparently and not actually, like the experience of having one's head cut off in a dream, is significant here, right? So it's here in this analogy we can think, and by the way, like the commentators, they dig into this analogy and they dig into it with different explanations. But what I want to present is the most fundamental, simple, clear interpretation of the analogy. That just like the moon is sitting there and is situated, it's never changing in one sense, right? And whereas the moon reflects on the water, because the water is rippling, the moon appears to be rippling, right? Quivering. And if we look at the reflection of the moon on the water and think that's the moon, then our conclusion will be that the moon is changing, the moon is quivering, although the moon isn't. So similarly, yeah.
I'm saying so in one sense there is this idea we put forward on a regular basis. You're not a body. You're not a body. You're not a body. And but here also, what it's really drilling is you're not the mind. So in the same way, to the degree that I invest in my body as myself, there's some pain, and there's some as the body starts to break down, as the body starts to age. When I was attached to that younger version of myself, and now I see myself in an older version or out of shape version, or I can't do the things I did before. In the same sense, that strong attachment to the mind is like it's sort of like cementing yourself to all the trouble that's happening in the windy water or in the rippling waves. It's like they're poor returns on investment, both of them. Now's the time to read this poem. You ready for the poem?
Okay, you want to drop it now? Go for it.
Here, I'm going to drop that poem. I was going to drop it earlier, but now it makes sense.
Okay.
Don't prioritize your looks, my friend.
Who is this coming from?
This is from Donna Ashworth.
Okay, who's Donna Ashworth?
She was just sort of like a little recluse poet living in the forest.
You know where she lived, actually? When she was writing this kind of stuff, I think. Remember when we had Shamasundar on the show?
Yeah, in Oregon.
Yeah, he was living up in Oregon. He was living on one of those, they have these towers that are out in the forest, and you live up in that tower, and your job is to look out for forest fires. So she was living like that. She was like, you're up there all alone in this big tower. You don't see anyone for months.
Waved from one tower to the other.
Yeah, so she was living like that, but these were her thoughts.
All right. Don't prioritize your looks, my friend, as they won't last the journey. Mm-hmm. Your sense of humor, though, will only get better with age. Your intuition will grow and expand like a majestic cloak of wisdom. Your ability to choose your battles will be fine-tuned to perfection. Your capacity for stillness, for living in the moment, will blossom. Your desire to live each and every moment will transcend all other wants. Your instinct for knowing what and who is worth your time will grow and flourish like ivy on a castle wall. Don't prioritize your looks, my friend. They will change forevermore. That pursuit is one of much sadness and disappointment. Prioritize the uniqueness that make you and the invisible magnet that draws in other like-minded souls to dance in your orbit. These are the things which only get better. What do you think about that, Kaustubha?
Well, yeah. In other words, there's some depth of realization here, right? She's saying don't prioritize your looks, but let's go ahead and say it like this: don't identify with your body, right? Like, if I think that this is me, then I'm very concerned that that my body is deteriorating, right? Like particularly like the looks that I have, right? It's going to happen to us all, right? As you get older. And so she's saying, come on, obviously that's like an investment that's not going to work out. Don't prioritize your looks, my friend. they won't last the journey. That's for sure. It's a recognition
That
of
is your currency. If that is the currency, if you're using our looks as our
You'll-
currency to get by in this world,
you'll go bankrupt.
yeah, the market's going to crash.
The market's going
There's-
to crash.
I'm going to
Okay.
put that on the board for the Zoomers. Hey, by the way, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., and you want to be one of the Zoomers,
Yeah.
you are welcome to. You just got to email us at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. And then Mara will give you the codes.
Okay. But so it seems like she's saying the identification with the body, the misidentification with the body, right? The misidentification. It's a poor investment. It's one that you're saying is doomed to crash. And then she's kind of focusing on the wisdom that that improves with time, rather than the body, which is certainly going to, decrease with time. So she gives one example is your sense of humor is going to get better. Your intuition is going to get better. She says the ability to choose your battles, right? Like that's a wise person, right? I don't waste my time with insignificant things.
Yeah.
Right. I'll figure out what's important to kind of invest conflict. If there's going to be a little conflict in the world, let me choose carefully when I want to engage in conflict. Right.
Yeah. And, I was saying too, it's like if that's what you use as your currency, if that's what you're using to get what you want, we're going to be let down. We can't use that in the material world as our winning formula. We got to go somewhere else.
Okay. So back to Vidura Maitreya, right? So again, in this analogy, the moon is in this analogy the Atma, or the self, and the water is the mind. And the mind, is such a fascinating and tricky thing that it seems like it's not matter, but it is matter, right? It's just a very subtle form of matter. And the nature of all matter, of all material energy, is that it's constantly moving. It's constantly, shifting. And so this key to existence, this key to our liberation, to our freedom from the kleshas, to our freedom from the different sufferings, is found in this answer, right? It opens up the door that what we're doing is we're misidentifying ourself with the mind. The Sanskrit is Atma Viparyaya. It's we're upset because we're identifying in such a way that's kind of like it's Viparyaya, which I think it means almost like backwards. It's like it's a total. It's just a mistake. So you're getting the opposite result of what you should. If by nature you're changeless, you're feeling like you're changeable or always changing. Right? I mean, I love this one. It gets to the essence of really what the nature of our problem is. It identifies where the problem is, right? It's drawing a circle around where our problem is. It lies how we identify, and that all exists in the mind.
Yeah, the whole yoga system, everything we do in yoga is to pacify the mind.
Yeah.
So we can see the self underneath the mind.
Yeah. This is what we've been talking about in the 4 paths of yoga that we were doing, as part of the Bhakti 101.
All right. So what's the best? So what? Well, I missed that.
Well, this is the idea that it's all based on this definition of yoga, that yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind. For what purpose? For the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. Right? We're experiencing the nature of the mind. I'm bored. We're experiencing the nature of the mind. I'm depressed. We're experiencing the nature of mind. I'm fearful. Those aren't the natures of the Atma, right? That's not the nature of the Atma. That's the nature of the mind, shifting. And shifting causes fear and lack of ananda causes boredom and so on. So yoga says, the mind is the cause of our not experiencing that nature. And we need a practice that's going to help us overcome the obstacle of the mind. And so the practices are the 4 different paths of yoga. And those 4 yogas are called Ashtanga Yoga, which is, Ashtanga, Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti Yogas. There's 4, Bhagavad Gita speaks of it this way, and many teachers have kind of divided it in that way. But they're all yoga because they're all practices which help us overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. But what makes one path different from the other? How did these 4 different paths of yoga, what makes each one unique? What makes each one different from the other? And that is that each one has a different strategy for how to deal with the mind. Right?
That's a nice way to say it. They have a different strategy of how to deal with the mind.
Yeah, they each have a different way. And when if a student of yoga can get a grip, can get a grasp on the nature of these 4 different ones and really understand, okay, I get it. This one is dealing with the mind in this way, and that one's dealing with the mind in another way. It actually really helps to make sense of all the different yoga teachings that you hear, because different teachers and different books are speaking from different strategic viewpoints, right? Mm. One person is speaking, when they speak about yoga, they're speaking about Ashtanga yoga, and another person, when they're speaking about yoga, is speaking about Bhakti-yoga or Karma yoga or Jnana yoga. The same terms will have different nuances when they're spoken in different contexts. So in Ashtanga yoga, the idea is that if I can still the mind, this is what's presented, right? If the mind could be held entirely still, the mind is always shifting, right? It's like that water that's always moving. If I look at the water, I'll never get a clear picture of the moon as long as the water is moving. But what if the water could be held still, right? Then I would look at that and I would get an accurate picture of the moon. And so the idea is, can we still the mind, and which is actually like pretty much the most difficult thing in the world to do. Mm. But that's the practice, right? And so you have your 8 limbs to do that. Like, what would be helpful for me to be able to sit still and for a long period of time hold my mind completely still? What would I have to do? Well, you're going to have to adjust your lifestyle, right? If you live in such a way.
It's amazing that as advanced as our civilization has come with all our progress, we've created this thing, this iPhone, to make the mind so unstill. It doesn't get more unstill than it is in the modern age with this phone. It's like the mind can't sit. We had this thing where no chanting. Like I tried to contact Parmananda yesterday, early in the morning about something, and I said, you know what? He's probably chanting without his iPhone.
Mm. Has he taken that up?
I called him later. I called him later, and he said, "Yeah, that was right. I was just chanting without my iPhone." So it's like it's such a distracted, and it just almost like magnetically pulls you. And there's probably 3 or 4 apps that pull you more than others. But the idea of that steady mind is not there, because this thing is following us around and like calling us, check me out. Stuff's happening. You're missing out on stuff. And it's like probably the number one source of like just disturbing the mind. If they can't, there should be we have to like maybe put a whole extra chapter on the Bhagavad Gita of like, and the cell phone chapter and how to deal with your smartphone. And the smartphone must be regulated for your pleasure, and to find the self, you must bury the smartphone, something like that. Or else it just drags the living entity off track all day long.
And that's
maybe I'm revealing too much. Maybe that's just me.
No, I don't think it's just you. I think it's all of us.
People just walk down the street looking in their phone.
But that's the such an invention. Is we look at it as progress, but it's only progress when you don't have the broader picture of what we're trying to accomplish in life. What a wise person is trying to accomplish in life. So. If
it was probably easier to calm your mind, Kaustubha, before we had so much information.
Yeah, sure, and then things begin to spiral quickly out of control, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, if you lived in a village, right, a simple village where there are no cell phones, and there are no television sets. And
there's no options, right?
Yeah.
In a village, you know the same old people. You sort of get bored with them. Like, you know what I mean? There's your desires don't get excited. It's like you go to the city. There's like this and that, and him and her. But in the village, it's sort of like everyone's sort of ordinary, same old faces. There's nothing new to almost like arouse you.
Well, yeah, and that can be boring too, but if there's a culture of wisdom, if there's a culture of wisdom, in other words, if within that setting, you give something very dynamic and very colorful and very exciting, you bring in Mahabharata and Ramayana and Bhagavatam,
Yeah.
and you have your dramas and you have your music, but most importantly, you have your focus on what the goal of life is, right?
Yeah.
Then you get then there's that encouragement, to go deep into this. I think of that.
You're doing it, man. You're surrounded by all the desires and the temptations of New York
but
City.
You've got a cell phone in your pocket too, right? So how much different is it?
Look how bland and boring me and Mara are. We're just living upstate, walking around, bumping into corn stalks. No one's offering. There's no offer. There's no temptations up here.
But then you might get this desire. I want to practice yoga, right? I want to turn my life into the practice of getting control of that mind and uncovering my own nature, right? And so again, like one way to do that is Ashtanga yoga. In Ashtanga yoga, the idea is I want to still the mind. And if I'm going to still the mind, I need the right lifestyle. So there's yama and niyama, right? I need to give up certain things or, restrict certain things, and I need to engage in certain things. And my body, also needs to be refined because the body affects the mind. So therefore there's asana. And the breathing needs to be refined because the breathing affects the mind. So there's pranayama. And the senses need to be controlled because the senses disturb the mind. So then pratyahara. And then, someone who's wandered off into the forest and practices these things for months, for years, then they might be able to begin to, really start to master dharana, like holding the mind on one, focusing the mind on one object. And when you master that, you can go into deeper states of dhyana, of meditation, where your mind becomes deeply absorbed in one object. And if you can master all that and do that for longer and longer periods of times, you can enter into the state called samadhi, like a state of trance, where all the programming in the mind becomes somehow adjusted in such a way that it's not interfering with your true nature, emerging like that, right? So that's one strategy. Jnana has another strategy. I'm going to break all the attachments in my mind through analysis, right? And practices of austerities, like tapas, tapas, like doing hard stuff, doing stuff that my mind's going to be saying, don't do this. Well, I don't listen to you anymore, and every little desire that I have in my mind, I'm going to, without any sentimentality, I'm going to analyze it and break it down and dissect it, pull it apart, and just toss it aside, So that's another strategy, right?
No chanting with the cell phone. That is the strategy for today. No chanting with the cell phone.
You seem obsessed with the cell phone today, but okay.
Well, I think these verses are just bringing this out. I was like, yeah. And also calling Parmananda yesterday and realizing, God, he's smart.
You turned him on to that idea, right?
Yeah, it was my idea back in the day, right? That was
but he's the one that's actually
Mondays.
doing it.
He's just following the smartness. I guess that's what makes you wise, when you get truth and you apply it. All right.
Why don't I go ahead and say the other two strategies just so that they're out there?
Go for it.
Okay. And so in karma yoga, the idea is it's taking the same, you see, in jnana yoga, the idea was based on my cold analysis, my jnana, my being able to distinguish what is spirit and what is matter. I'll break all my attachments. And I'll do that through renunciation, just kind of leaving the world behind. But in karma yoga, it's taking the same knowledge, it's taking the same jnana, but it's applying it in this world, right? Like, I'm going to keep my social responsibilities, but I'm going to do them with knowledge and detachment. So I'm doing the same things that like a materialist may be doing, but with a totally different motive. Whereas they're doing it with a motive like, I'll get money so they can buy the things that'll make me happy. Though the karma yogi says, my happiness comes from within. I don't need anything external, but I do these things as service, right? To care for my family, to care for my community. I do them as a service to God, like that. So in this way, the whole ego, which is part of the mind, is shifted, right? Is from this world's meant to be revolving around me. I'm the center too. I'm the servant, right? That I work not for my own money. Those fruits of that work, I make it an offering, as a servant. And in Bhakti Yoga, the idea is I'm going to harmonize the mind, right? Harmonize the mind with the nature of the soul, right? If by nature my soul is devoted to God, if by nature my soul is blissful, if by nature my soul is in possession of deep knowledge, if by nature my soul has all the qualities of, the lover of God, compassion, kindness, generosity, like that. Well, then let me bring in through my senses, whereas other yogas are like, let's restrict the senses and let's like shut them down. Like you go into a state of pratyahara, right? Yeah, let me shut down the senses. In Bhakti Yoga, it's let me engage all those senses. But let me engage them in such a way that the information, all the data that's coming through the receivers, the eyes and the ears, etc., that all that data will reprogram that mind so that it's in perfect harmony with my nature, so that I bring in messages of kindness and compassion and generosity, etc., that I bring in data, information that's infused with, devotion and true wisdom. And if I do that through the books that I read and contemplate and talk about and question and hear from, that's called Shravanam, right? And if I do that through mantra, right, kirtanam, right, whether it's, chanting japa or in the devotional music, right? And if I do that through the ritual that I perform, and if I do that through all the different cultural arts that are related to bhakti, then in this way, whatever I'm bringing in, it's reprogramming, it's refreshing my mind. It's reshaping my mind to the point where that mind is in complete harmony with my own true nature. And when my mind and myself are no longer at odds with each other, when there's no longer a conflict between them, then that's called yoga, right? That the two become connected, rejoined, reunited, and so that's how Bhakti Yoga is practiced. So each one has a different strategy for how to deal with the mind, but they're all recognizing that we're identifying with the mind, and that's the nature of our problem.
Shall we move on?
No, we shall not.
No.
This yoga philosophy bores you, doesn't it, Raghunath?
No, it's interesting.
Okay. I was going to save those other verses for tomorrow. They're also very, very deep.
So we're all going to sit here now and just think of things. Think of nothing.
Not think of nothing, but
Give us a
here's the
yoga
point.
practice.
In Ashtanga yoga, you might try to focus the mind on just one thing, but in Bhakti yoga, it's engaged so much in the culture. Like, for instance, Raghunath, I know that on Sunday you attended a festival. Tell us about it.
It was well, first we had Sweet Baby Nimai for the Patreon members. That was very fun.
Mm-hmm. What was that?
It was sort of a festival of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Mara wasn't there. Were you there, Mara?
It was like 4 a.m. where she was or something like that.
No, it was actually 5 a.m.
5 a.m. Then you should have been there.
Should have been there. And then we had a really beautiful thing at Bliss Kitchen, which is in support of, hey, if you're in New Paltz, they're about to open Krishna Kitchen. I love these Krishna restaurants that pop up because they're serving vegetarian food. It's a meditation.
They're opening a second restaurant?
Krishna Kitchen.
They already have Bliss Kitchen, now they're opening a Krishna Kitchen?
Yeah, but it's a little bit more of a cooler neighborhood in New Paltz.
Okay. How far away is that from the other one?
I don't know. Not that far. 30 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was nice. We did, I just spoke for 45 minutes on Lord Chaitanya. And it's hard talking about Lord Chaitanya because the teachings are very high, but he also gave something very simple. So it's sort of like a delicate balance of trying to keep it simple, especially if people are new to this. But it was a cool group, and a lot of our Zoomers were there.
Well, you told me that there was some Champak did some kind of presentation.
There was like quality dance and music but chanting.
Well, here's my point.
Not
See, this is what I was driving
Not
at,
typical. Oh, this is what you wanted me to say. Well, you got to hold up cards then if you want to lead me towards something. There was people dancing and people playing like piano and people playing like drum. It was like these guys were like really talented.
Who were the musicians?
Who are they?
Yeah.
I
Was
don't
it
really know
Premananda
them.
Huh?
Premananda. He's very good.
Yeah.
And the other two I just met.
Okay. How did you feel after? God, what do I?
It lifted me. It lifted me high. It lifted me
Okay.
high. I danced. I was hiding in the back, but I was sort of doing my own private dance.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so we're engaged in bhakti. We're engaging our senses. We're moving our senses, moving our body. We're not just being still. We're actually dancing.
Yeah.
We're dancing around. We're like dancing gets you out of the mind. There's no, there even for example, if you ever been to a kirtan, you're like watching some other people dancing, but you're sitting, and they're just sort of like dancing, and you're like, oh yeah, dancing, this is good. And then someone grabs you by the wrist and goes, no, dance, come on, dance. You're like, ugh. And you immediately have to deal with your body. Then you have to deal with like your ego, like I don't even know how to dance, and it like takes you right out of the body, mind, and ego instantly. So you could see how bhakti works. It's a different method, but it works. You actually, all those things you're trying to overcome and big hurdles, your ego and your sense of identity with your tongue and your belly and your genitals, all those things you're trying to detach yourself. You could do it all very simply in bhakti yoga. So that's we had everybody ended up transcending.
Was there some ritual?
Ritual singing. Ritual?
Okay, but they didn't have some kind of
offer incense. No, we didn't like
deity,
bathe the deity or anything like that.
Okay, I went to the Bhakti Center and attended
ritual.
There was ritual there. It was the first time that there had been a relatively large gathering in that place in over a year. Wow. It was surreal. Everyone was walking around wearing masks.
Halloween masks?
No. And
we'll never say mask again anymore. Now mask means one thing.
And I was asked to speak, but then they also had Genevieve was there. She liked kirtan, absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. There was devotional ritual there as well. But just really wonderful to be back with. That's another part of the culture, right? It's not about isolating oneself, but in Bhakti Yoga, it's really about there may be times to spend alone, and that can be important, but it's also about, being in the association of others that are practicing it. So it was beautiful. It was wonderful to be with everyone again.
Sweet.
Did you feel a sense of auspiciousness descend on the event in a profound way?
Sometimes you wait for it, and then it descended.
It did.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you're like, is this going to be any good? Is this going to stink? But it did. And truthfully, it happens as soon as people start chanting.
Right.
Sense of auspiciousness dropped.
Beautiful.
The auspiciousness net just fell upon us.
I always think, the Gaur Purnima, again, which is the festival that celebrates the birth of Sri Chaitanya, I don't know if you did as much as I did, but I celebrated that in Mayapur for probably like 10 years in a row when I was a monk. Right? Did you do that?
I'd always go to Vrindavan for Gaur Purnima.
Okay.
I don't like crowds. Believe it or not. Unless I'm the center, then I love.
You just like holy. That's why you're in Vrindavan, because you like holy. I never experienced that heavy holy that's experienced in Vrindavan because I was always in Mayapur at the time. But always being there on that day and always like there being a big feast and always watching that big moon rise over and always feeling a sense of a sense of joy. Just in a very special way, just kind of like...
It's like a sublime way.
In a very sublime way, descend, on that place and in those events. But it's true that, that culture that you and I learned in those holy places, and so many people that we know learned in those holy places, it can be recreated, it can be, even in a place like New Paltz, New York, in some unopened restaurant or something like that, right?
Yeah. It doesn't take anything. It's not the fancy architecture. It's the quality of the people, what's coming out of their mouth. It's the sound vibrations coming out of their mouth. It can be recreated anywhere. That's a beautiful.
Speaking of
thing to say
sound
about
vibrations.
vibration. Speaking of sound vibration, I'm ready to dance and transcend my body right now. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you're listening out there, you want to join our Zoom group, I'll say it again. There are secret codes you must attain. You must write Mara at Wisdom of the Sages 108@gmail.com. Getting a lot of great letters. I'm going to Nepal soon, so I'm going to figure out a plan how we're going to do this because I'm traveling Monday and Tuesday. But we're hoping to see everybody. Q&A day. Write your questions in. We got some beautiful questions coming in. And then Sunday's Easter. We're going to have an Easter show.
Yeah, we'll have an Easter show. What is this egg hunt?
The kids do egg hunts.
Raghunath wrote to me,
Kaustubha.
are we going to do a show on Easter? 8 a.m. is like prime egg hunt time. I sent him. I made a meme with Sheila Prabhupada saying,
He doesn't get it.
"What is this egg hunt?"
Kids need to hunt for eggs. It's part of the thing.
The 100 eggs at 7 or 9 or something like that. But you don't stop the Bhagavatam for an egg hunt. Sorry, man.
It's all the Bhagavatam, man.
No, it's not.
It's also the Bhagavatam. You're looking at it with different lenses.
Raghu, you're doing Sweet Baby Krishna tonight?
Oh, yeah, tonight, Sweet Baby Krishna for Patreon members. If you want to be a Patreon member, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages, and you can join us there for a celebratory Krishna reading and storytelling and chanting of mantras. It's fun. 7 to 8 tonight on Patreon. And then Thursday, I'm doing a reading of my book, my memoirs. Memoir sounds too weird, but it's my book, my story.
Memoir, that's what it is.
My memoirs by Raghunath. Memoir reading Thursday, 7 o'clock. Hope to see you there, Patreon people. And join our little Patreon party. All right. Now,